Personal explanations, there are none. Notice of motions for the adjournment of the House on matters of urgent public importance, there are none. Introduction of bills, we have two bills to be introduced today, both by the Premier. Premier, would you like to present the bills?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I am introducing the following bills for their first reading so that they may be placed on the order paper for the next day of meeting, and that is the Corporate Income Tax Act 2023 and the Bermuda Monetary Authority Amendment Act 2023.
Thank you. There are no opposition bills, no private bills. Notice of motions, there are none. That now, members and listening audience, that leads us to the orders of the day. There are two items on for the debate today, and the first is the second reading of the Bermuda Immigration and Protection Prohibition Order Amendment Act 2023 in the name of the Minister of Economy and Labor. Minister Hayward, would you like to present your bill?
Good afternoon, Mr. Speaker.
Good afternoon.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the bill entitled the Bermuda Immigration and Protection Prohibition Order Amendment Act 2023 be now read a second time.
Are there any objections? There are none. Proceed, Minister.
Mr. Speaker, on November 24th, 2023, I tabled the bill entitled the Bermuda Immigration and Protection Prohibition Order Amendment Act 2023 and indicated that the purpose of the bill is to demand the Bermuda Immigration and Protection Act 1956, commonly known as BIPA. Mr. Speaker, the bill seeks to change the procedure for making orders prohibiting lending or entry into Bermuda under Section 26 from the affirmative resolution procedure to the negative resolution procedure. The subject of lending or entry into Bermuda is important, especially respecting prohibitions that may be attached to persons lending or entry. The change from the affirmative resolution procedure to the negative resolution procedure provides for timely decision-making and faster internal and external communications about or to any person to whom a prohibition will or will not apply. Mr. Speaker, as orders made under Section 26(2) are currently subject to the affirmative resolution procedure, the process does not allow the government to address matters that may arise pertaining to the security of our borders with a sense of urgency. To address the matters urgently, the minister must utilize Section 26(3) of the Act, which provides that an order may be made without the need for the affirmative resolution procedure, provided the order is certified by the governor as urgently required in the public interest. Such an order is effective for 30 days. If the House is not scheduled to sit for longer than the 30 days, the minister is required to obtain multiple 30-day orders from the governor. Mr. Speaker, in the course of the above described experience, it became apparent to the ministry that the government needs greater flexibility to adjust the list of prohibited classes of persons. Our current policy concerning visitors beds Bermuda to other countries' visa requirements, so the Bermuda government needs the ability to adjust at short notice if necessary. The proposed amendments to Section 26(2) of the Act to enable such an order to be made subject to the negative resolution procedure would enable Bermuda to adjust the list of visa control nationals on short notice while still subjecting the list to parliamentary scrutiny and the governor's assent. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Minister. Does any other member wish to make a contribution at this time? Opposition Leader, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. We thank the Honorable Minister for bringing this legislation to the House. And we have a few questions and points to make about this legislation. First of all, we recognize the necessity that a government can control its borders. Without a question, immigration is a complex issue, and immigration in Bermuda has become somewhat of a political hot topic over the years. But what has to absolutely always take place is the executive has to maintain the ability to protect Bermuda and Bermudians and to make sure that everything is conducted within the bounds of law. So with that being said, we acknowledge the necessity of this, but we still have questions to put to the minister, and not only by myself, but other honorable members. Specifically, this bill seems to transition power, given the urgency of making an order. The minister did describe the process that allows for a governor's certification and then some subsequent complications relating to how long that order can last and the meeting of the House and those sorts of things. But that power does exist as it stands. It has been used successfully quite recently. So to see that we're going to amend it was an interesting point. Obviously, there's some need for expediency and there's some need for moving with a sense of urgency. But again, that power already exists within the legislation. So we thought, well, this is an interesting piece of legislation. What's particularly interesting to me, though, Mr. Speaker, is the move, which I believe we've spoken about a number of times, is the move from an affirmative resolution procedure to a negative resolution procedure. The reason that this comes to our mind is because although the argument is made for urgency, we've already pointed out that there is a mechanism by which to get urgent matters dealt with under this current section, the unamended section. The negative resolution means that by the time this honorable House, or indeed Parliament altogether, gets to see the legislation, the matter's already been dealt with, and the procedures for picking up the matter, for example, moving to pick up the matter, moving to have a debate, that's not exactly straightforward, and in fact can be quite complex sometimes, especially if the government doesn't wish the matter to be picked up. So it's not exactly a straightforward process to go from affirmative resolution into negative resolution. So the first question would be, what about the current legislation is so problematic that requires it to be amended in this way, especially given that it's already been used successfully in recent memory? With that being said, Mr. Speaker, I definitely concede that this legislation is in desperate need of updating. One of the changes, without going into too much detail, for example, speaks about a wife of an applicant versus a spouse of an applicant. So undoubtedly, it's quite dated. Also, Mr. Speaker, there's some concern about oversight of this particular power. This will enable the minister, after consultation with the chief immigration officer, to create some very powerful pieces of statutes. And as it stands right now, the only person enshrined in this legislation who will be able to effectively permit a person to land or remain in Bermuda after the minister makes such an order is the chief immigration officer. Again, this is a consolidation of power into the executive without parliamentary oversight. So the question would then be to the honorable minister and to this government, how are you going to oversee such authority, or how is this honorable parliament supposed to oversee such authority given its so significance? I think, Mr. Speaker, that is the points that we have with this piece of legislation. Again, definitely conceding the necessity that the government have authority and power to oversee the borders. But what we have to make sure is that that is always balanced by principles of natural justice and parliamentary oversight. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Opposition Leader. Does any other member wish to make a contribution at this time? Any other? MP Jackson,
Yes,
you have the
thank
floor.
Mr. Speaker. I just have a couple of questions. And I'm just curious what the motivation is, or what specific kinds of circumstances where this would arise, where there'd have to be a negative resolution, and wondering if the minister might be able to just give us a couple of examples. Because when I think of this, it either feels like it could be that in an emergency service situation, a country of origin may be waived in order to allow travelers to enter into Bermuda. And if that's the case, I would imagine we would be in it would be of national interest that we're in an emergency situation. And, I'm just thinking about some other countries that are much larger, where if there's upheaval around the world and there are people who are looking for sanctuary, that there may be an emergency situation where a place like Bermuda may have to change its order in order to allow or accommodate from a compassionate perspective. So, if I could get a little bit of context around that, it would certainly assist me in understanding a bit more. And I don't also understand why, given the fact that we did just have an order, and we are all within Parliament at least aware of different countries that require, visas for entry and things like that, that it already is a set framework for Bermuda to operate in. So under the circumstances, I'm just curious, again, where we would have borders or people crossing into our borders that would not be already part of what is a visa and travel and country framework that is already in place that was just passed in the House a couple of months ago. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Deputy Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I think this legislation is appropriate. I think the power of the immigration should rest with the minister, because in times of national emergency, if that was the case where the minister has to act, the country is not looking for an answer from the civil servant, they're looking for an answer from the minister. And as we know, as immigration is very sensitive in all countries, particularly Bermuda, we expect the minister to be in charge here and to make a decision, Mr. Speaker, particularly with today's world affairs. Things are happening overnight, and I'm glad my minister our minister has brought this legislation to have it amended so that the power rests where it should rest. And his knocking, as the act says, he will consult before he makes a decision. And that decision, that person who answers, the person who the country is looking at again, they can look at the minister. So I think this is appropriate piece of amendment, piece of legislation, and we support the minister with this. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Is there any other member who should make a contribution? Minister Campbell?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I want to think about Mr. and Mrs. Smith, Mr. and Mrs. Jones, the Browns, the Douglases, the Williamses, and the Tyrrells. The Tyrrells, the Simmonses, the Cabrals, the Monases, the Pachecos. Yes, I want to think about all those people and talk about why. Why do we typically amend immigration laws? Why do we change immigration laws? Because there seems to be suspicion from the other side whenever we talk about changing immigration laws on this side. There's always this element of, why are you doing this? Suspicion. So let's talk about why we typically amend immigration laws. National security, economic concerns, and changes in the needs of society. So amendments to immigration laws may be enacted to strengthen national security by implementing strict or stricter controls on the entry of individuals who may pose a threat. That's what we're talking about here with this bill. Another reason is economic consideration. Changes in immigration policies may be driven by economic factors, such as the need for specific skills or workforce to support the country's economic growth. And changes in societal needs. We have social and cultural factors. Amendments might reflect efforts to maintain or promote certain cultural or social values within the country. You may have changes to laws to address humanitarian issues or to provide protection to vulnerable groups. We also may make changes in immigration policy that impact the country's relations with other nations, particularly if there are implications for diplomatic or trade relationships. So what we have here, as I stated before, is a change from a national security perspective. And why would we do that? To protect our borders. It was stated, it's accepted that we're doing this to protect our borders, but we don't trust the minister and the chief immigration officer to make the right decision. So that is the key. The minister does not act alone. He has to consult with the chief immigration officer able to affect the changes that are required under these amendments. So why is there always suspicion from the other side when this side wants to amend immigration laws?
Point of order, point of order.
Point of order.
Mr. Speaker,
Yes.
the honorable member is unfortunately misleading the House. There's no suspicion whatsoever. The questions that were asked are fair questions, just trying to understand a little better what the minister may be thinking. There's no suggestion that the minister and the chief immigration officer can't do the job. I think we believe that they can. Just give us an understanding better of the decision-making, that's all.
Okay. You understand? The opposition sound like they would like to come along with you and they just want to paddle in the same direction. They're trying to get a little help so they can paddle along with you.
Yeah, well, it's not the first time, and there's also a track record there that would support what I'm saying. But Mr. Speaker, on your first day back, I will end right here and say that I do support the amendments being brought by the minister, and I do thank him for bringing them. Thank you.
Thank you. Does any other member wish to make a contribution? MP Lawrence Scott, you have the floor.
Good afternoon, Mr. Speaker.
Good afternoon.
Mr. Speaker, I stand today to speak in favor of this piece of legislation because as I read the legislation, this is the minister showing that there is a vision for our immigration policy on a whole moving forward, meaning that instead of doing what we have always done in the past and take this piece of immigration legislation from over here and take a piece from over there, the cherry pick from this country and cherry pick from that country and amalgamate them together. This is giving the minister the ability to sit there and say, what policy, what programs work best for Bermuda in the time that we are in right now with an ever-changing and rapidly changing, not just physical landscape, but geopolitical landscape as well. And so what this is doing is the minister is saying, I am privy and my team is privy to information on a minute-to-minute, moment-by-moment basis. And with that information, I will be able to, my team will be able to, or his team will be able to make a decision, a policy adjustment, a course adjustment that works in the best interest of the country. And so therefore, sometimes we've seen it. And I'll use COVID as an example. If there is an event, that unforeseen circumstance where we cannot get to Parliament within the 30 days, if we cannot get to Parliament in a timely manner, that does not leave our borders unprotected in the manner that the Minister of Immigration and the government believes so. And so when the opposition asks, why this, why now? The legislation, as I read it and understand it, it's because of what can happen, what will happen, what could happen, and let's show that we have vision in preparing not just a piecemeal or a stopgap measure, but putting a full and wholesome program together in its entirety. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, MP. Does any other member wish to make a contribution at this time? There are none. Minister Hayward?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think the members of this honorable house that have supported this amendment thus far. To provide clarity, there is a current process in place. The current process is not efficient or effective. getting draft orders that have to be continuously put in place from the government as emergency orders for changes that the government wants to make is not the most appropriate use of resources. When you can take that same time to put an order in place that we can just bring to the House and it will get the parliamentary scrutiny at the appropriate time. It also, that process creates a limitation. And I'll explain. We had a temporary order in place where we listed over 100 countries on that particular order. Then we had caveats to whom that order would apply to. For example, there is an ability for persons to transit through the UK without a visa, but cannot enter the UK with a visa. We in our local policy says that those persons, if they obtain a work permit and they go through our scrutiny locally, then we will allow them to transit through the UK on a work permit. That allows work permit holders who come from territories who were listed under visa control nationals as visa control nationals to enter Bermuda. Unfortunately, the order that I placed before Parliament doesn't have that caveat in it. And so that caveat is a policy. The reason being is because the original order, that was the emergency order that we tabled and sent to, that we had sent to Government House, could not be amended. We had to table the order as presented to the governor. And as a result, that caveat is a caveat that we have in policy, but it's not a feature of the order. So if a work permit holder goes through a jurisdiction where that are unfamiliar with the policy that we have in place, they cannot refer to the order because the order doesn't make mention to work permit holders. So any authority from that territory would have to marry our policy versus what is the order, which is the law. If it was a negative resolution procedure, it easily allows me to add additional caveats such as work permit holders to the current order. And so this is not just about changing countries that are listed on the order. It's also about creating the caveats for when we are satisfied that there is additional scrutiny that takes place. For example, the UK is now introducing electronic travel authorizations. If we are satisfied with the level of vetting that takes place for one to obtain a level electronic travel authorization, we may then amend our order to say that it is something that we would accept in our jurisdiction. And as a result, we'd have caveats for that group of individuals as well. This just gives the ministry a level of flexibility as it pertains to amending and provides an efficient way moving forward. Every change that is made will come before Parliament under the negative resolution procedure. The other thing in terms of when we start to speak about power, the minister responsible for immigration currently has the power to prohibit anybody from entering Bermuda as it currently stands in legislation. That's on an individual basis. But from a nationality standpoint, it's a bit different. So it's not like we're giving the minister additional power that he does not already have, or the moving it from affirmative resolution to negative resolution creates a level of authority that the minister currently does not possess. It clearly just creates a more efficient and effective way to make changes to the current landscape, to take into consideration some of the geopolitical considerations as pertains to ever-changing world and what's going on with the world, and having an effective way of making those particular changes. Mr. Speaker, in addition to that, I trust that the consultation process that I'll have with the Chief Immigration Officer will be one that takes into consideration what are the current challenges that we face, as well as pertains to persons transiting Bermuda and providing clarity to language that may not be as clear as it ought to be. And so I just don't want persons understand this to be, we be adding and removing countries without some type of rhyme or reason. it's about having a robust structure in place that allows the minister to put in place the appropriate mechanisms in an efficient and effective way. Mr. Speaker, I now move that the bill be committed.
Thank you. Deputy?
Honorable members, we are now in committee of the whole for further consideration of the bill entitled the Bermuda Immigration and Protection Prohibition Order Amendment Act 2023. Minister Hayward, you have the floor.
Mr. Speaker, I move clauses 1 and 2.
Continue.
Mr. Speaker, Clause 1 provides for the citation of the bill. Clause 2 replaces and repeals Section 26 of BEPA and makes clear in the order lending or entry which is prohibited. Nothing in Section 23, 24, or 25 of the Principal Act prevents the minister, after consultation with the Chief Immigration Officer, from prohibiting the lending or entry into Bermuda of persons or any particular nationality from any particular place or of any category during the period specified in the order. Subsection 1 of the order will not prohibit the lending or entry of any person who possesses Bermuda status or who is the spouse or dependent child of a person who possesses Bermuda status, and in respect to whom the conditions in Section 27 are satisfied. Also pursuant to Section 1, any person provided in an order who lends in, enters into, remains, or resides in Bermuda without the written permission of the Chief Immigration Officer shall be removed or deported from Bermuda and shall be financially responsible for any public charges incurred in respect of their removal or deportation. In Section 3, the written permission provided by the Chief Immigration Officer shall be subject to any conditions or restriction as appears to the Chief Immigration Officer to be necessary or desirable in the public interest, and any person prohibited to land or enter, remain, or reside shall comply with such conditions or restrictions. Lastly, an order is made under Section 1 shall be subject to the negative resolution procedure. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Minister Hayward. Any further speakers? The chair recognizes the honorable member, Scott Pearman.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the Honorable Minister. I just have one question in relation to proposed Section 2, subsection, well, actually, it's the replacement that appears under Clause 2, and it's the entire replacement. And if you read the subsection numbers of the replacement, it's about subsection 4 at the top of page 2 of the bill. And there it refers to a written permission provided by the Chief Immigration Officer in subsection 3. So if we refer back to subsection 3, we see there a reference to the written permission. And I'm just wondering how these two are interrelating, because the written permission there is presumably the permission up at 1, subsection 1 above. And then the deportation and charge of deportee is at 3. And then at 4, it's talking about the written permission in subsection 3. But I'm assuming that that is in fact referring back to the written permission referred to in 1, not in 3. And if that's right, then my second question is this: the requirement that conditions and restrictions as appear to the Chief Immigration Officer to be necessary, desirable in the public interest, is that a change in the approach as exists now with written permissions, or is that as it currently exists under the legislation for written permission? Thank you very much. Just those two questions.
Minister?
The written permission is the written permission in 26.1. 26.3 speaks to more of the consequences and the powers that the Chief Immigration Officer will have if one does not obtain the written permission in 1. This is standard and consistent with procedures that are currently possessed by the Chief Immigration Officer.
With your leave, Mr. Chair?
Yes, sir.
Yes, thank you very much. In that case, I do wonder whether or not subsection 4, where it says written permission provided by the chief immigration officer in subsection 3, whether that's in fact a typo and it should say subsection 1. I leave it with the minister to correct if that's the case or not if that's not the case. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Member Pearman. Mrs. Minister?
I can confer with the drafters, but subsection 3 makes reference, subsection 4 makes reference to subsection 3, which ultimately makes reference to subsection 1. And so they are all interlinked. And so whether you refer to 3 or you refer to 1, it takes you back to the appropriate section.
Anything further? Any other speakers? There appear to be none, Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I move that clauses 1 and 2 be approved.
It has been moved that clauses 1 and 2 be approved. Are there any objections to that? There appear to be none approved.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the preamble be approved.
It's been moved that the preamble be approved. Any objections to that? There appear to be none approved.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the bill be reported to the House as printed.
It has been moved that the bill be reported to the House as printed. Any objections? There appear to be none. The bill will be reported to the House as printed. Mr. Speaker.
Members, are there any objections to the bill entitled Corporate Income? Sorry, wrong one. Starting on the wrong section here. Members, are there any objections to the bill entitled the Bermuda Immigration and Protection Prohibition Order Amendment Act 2023 being reported to the House as printed? There are none. The bill has been reported as printed. That brings us to a close of that matter. We'll move on to the next item on the order paper. The next item is also in the name of the Minister of Economy and Labor, and it's the consideration of the economic development designation of an economic empowerment zone, Southeast Hamilton Order 2023. Minister?
Mr. Speaker, I move that consideration be given to the draft order entitled the Economic Development Designation of Economic Empowerment Zone, Southeast Hamilton Order 2023, proposed to be made by the minister responsible for the Bermuda Economic Development Corporation in exercise of the power conferred by Section 2A of the Economic Development Act 1968. Mr. Speaker, on November 24th,
Before you
2020.
there, any objections to the minister proceeding? None? Continue, Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On November 24th, 2023, I tabled the order entitled the Economic Development Designation of Economic Empowerment Zone, Southeast Hamilton Order 2023. Essentially, the order creating the new Southeast Hamilton Economic Empowerment Zone. Mr. Speaker, the Bermuda Economic Development Corporation has made substantial strides to date in creating the productive partnership in both the public and private sectors to establish the 3 existing economic empowerment zones and anticipates doing the same with the new 4th EEZ. The first EEZ was established in North Hamilton in June 2007. 2 additional EEZs in Somerset and St. George's were established in March 2011. The initiative continues to meet the government's goals of empowering businesses and residents in these designated areas. Mr. Speaker, the PLP's 2020 election platform had a goal to transform the city of Hamilton into a livable city by fostering the development of residential and mixed-use developments, not just in the city, but across EEZs. Mr. Speaker, today I am pleased to share with the members of this House another milestone in the government's empowerment remit, as well as bringing the economic recovery plan projects to fruition. The order before the House today seeks to establish a new economic empowerment zone in Southeast Hamilton under Section 2A of the Economic Development Act 1968. Mr. Speaker, Southeast Hamilton has an important role as the gateway to the city, providing key commuter routes into and out of Hamilton. All commuters that reside in Western Bermuda, along with many from Eastern Bermuda, pass through Southeast Hamilton to enter and exit the city. Additionally, it plays a key role in the economy of Bermuda as it hosts the container docks. However, the full economic and development potential of Eastern Hamilton, both north and south, have not yet been fully realized compared to central and western areas of the city. Designation as an EEZ provides access to economic development tools to reach this potential. Mr. Speaker, respondents to a survey conducted by the Bermuda Economic Development Corporation were in strong agreement there should be more economic investment in the area, citing such reasons as the need for investing in building refurbishment, under development, and the need for support of many small businesses in the area, as well as the need to encourage more entrepreneurship in the area. The research also concluded that there is a need for increased investment opportunities in the area to benefit the efficacy of the EEZ. Improvements and capital investments would not only increase business success and employment opportunities, but prospects for residential developments in a mixed-use environment would increase the consumer base within the proposed zone. Mr. Speaker, the area of land outlined in red on the respective map contained in the schedule to the order is proposed to be designed as an economic empowerment zone. The area recommended for EEZ designation comprises approximately 6 city blocks plus the cargo docks. The zone is almost entirely within the city limits, bounded west by Coor Street and north by Victoria Street, and south by the Hamilton Harbor Shore Line. The eastern boundary runs approximately along the eastern city boundary to include some adjacent properties. Ultimately, the total area of the proposed zone is approximately 41 acres, with 33 acres of developable land. Mr. Speaker, the corporation is actively working on additional EEZ business development and economic development projects and tools with local banks, and this government aimed at facilitating further economic activity. Doing business in and with an EEZ also brings about added benefits, and dedicated BEDC business development officers to work specifically with businesses in each zone on business expansion and retention. In addition, dedicated economic development officers can be seen with BEDC's Uptown Development Authority, whose sole role is to connect EEZ property owners, investors, and developers together to continually regenerate this opportunity zone. It is important to strike the balance with both business development and economic development, as both are interlinked to successful and sustained economic activity. Mr. Speaker, as evidence, this government is committed to facilitating a viable, reputable business environment, as well as development and economic regeneration of our economic empowerment zones. To this end, the Ministry of Economy and Labor will continue to make economic empowerment an imperative by creating sound, progressive policies which support investment, regeneration, and growth aligned with our economic development strategy. The creation of the Southeast Hamilton Economic Empowerment Zone through tabling or through the passage of today's order will bring this new zone into existence and is a tangible example of the commitment, and it opens the door for new and existing businesses and economic development possibilities for Southeast Hamilton. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Minister. Does any other member wish to make a contribution? So, Opposition Leader, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Bermuda's survival very much depends, Bermuda's success, its prosperity depends on what we do with the city of Hamilton. It's our key commercial area. It's an area where most of our businesses exist. Most of our work, labor is carried out in the city of Hamilton. And one of the things we always have to make sure is that we're developing a city that is equipped for the modern age. The city of Hamilton obviously is quite dated with quite a small footprint and has typically not been a high concentration of residential areas and things like that. Bermuda moving forward has to adapt to certain realities, new realities. For example, not working in an office all the time, things like that, commuting back and forth. And it's absolutely crucial that we make use of this city with such a small footprint. To that end, EEZ expanding in this way will go some way to providing more prosperity for businesses. Businesses mean jobs. Jobs mean security. Security means better families. So to that end, we're looking forward to seeing this. There's a great example of the kind of benefit that can be had in a thriving city. So for example, before the development of Sion Place, there was obviously not a big space for banner in the city. Now with that development, there's that huge banner out there, and it's a bit funny because it provides this sort of cultural focus. So whether it's America's Cup, we can put up signs there, or whether it's Dame Flora Duffy's success, we can put up signs there. And maybe I'd encourage the government to put up a sign for our young lady's recent success as it relates to NCAA football, because it allows for us to focus. And this is quite key. So I'm glad to see that the city is continually developing. I'm glad to see that we have our eye on prosperity in the city. And I look forward to seeing more and more businesses thrive again, because business provides jobs, jobs provide security, and security provides for families. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Does any other member wish to make a contribution? Any other member? MP Jackson?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just had a couple of questions for the minister. I was wondering, given the fact that we have had a number of plans that are out there, we've got the Bermuda plan, and specifically I was looking through the Hamilton plan. And so that's a comprehensive vision for the development, sustainability of Hamilton. So I'm just curious whether the government, the BEDC are in conversations along with other stakeholders, including those who have authored the Hamilton plan, to make sure that, you know, everybody understands and has an opportunity to share what their visions might be for, in particular, Southeast Hamilton. Because as the opposition leader has just mentioned, that is the entrance into our city. And of course, there are probably all different visions as to how we'd like that to happen. And Mr. Speaker, I guess you and I, maybe a few others, are the only ones in the room that remember how exciting it was when we had to move the bus terminal off of East Broadway and create what has become a very, in my opinion, efficient means of entering the city. So now we're at the crossroads. We're right at a fork in the road where we've got Front Street in Southeast Hamilton and we've got going up Sperling Hill. What would that look like so that we are developing, as the opposition leader had just mentioned, you know, the sort of the footprint for the future of Hamilton in Bermuda. And so if the minister might be able to just give us a little bit of information about how we're going to make sure that that works and we don't end up watching, you know, horns knock because people have different visions on how that may or may not work out amicably for everybody. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, honorable member. Does any other member? MP Adams.
Afternoon, Mr. Speaker.
Good afternoon. How are you?
Pretty good, thanks. Mr. Speaker, I'll be brief this afternoon, but as the chair of the BEDC, I just wanted to express my support to this bill in the establishment of the Southeast Hamilton Economic Empowerment Zone. I think it's important to first acknowledge that the purpose of establishing an EZZ was primarily based on providing additional support and relief to businesses and communities in designated areas that traditionally had not seen the level of investment compared to others. I mention this because it speaks to one of the core principles of the Progressive Labor Party, which strives for economic parity. And so we have, and with this bill, continue to identify areas that have gone decades of underinvestment, and in response, have put together a structure and initiative, if you will, aimed to reverse that trend. And so, Mr. Speaker, as the minister mentioned, one of the advantages of businesses and property owners within Southeast Hamilton will see is the immediate reduction in land tax. And so I'm sure existing property owners within the area as well as those that are looking to reduce their overhead, or maybe those who are starting a business who are in the midst of considering where to where to locate their business, would be happy to hear that now Southeast Hamilton, they would receive a reduction in their land tax. But there's also the fact that businesses will see the payroll tax concessions as well. You see, this government, along with the BEDC, recognize that the early years of a business, for most instances, are the most difficult ones. And so these concessions is another form of relief that will certainly be most welcome for these businesses, to allow them to get in a more stable footing in the future. And I mention all of this to basically say that the BEDC also has an objective of providing preferential rates to those that they lend or provide funding to, as well as customs deferment duty. And I say all of that really to say that with this piece of legislation, a new business can purchase a building within the Southeast Hamilton and receive the reduced land tax. They can then start their business or the operations of their business for the first year and receive payroll tax concessions. That same business can then go to the BEDC and get a preferential rate on their loan as they go to buy inventory, and then receive a customs duty deferment once that duty or once that inventory arrives. And so this government, along with the BEDC, continue to find ways to best serve our small businesses and entrepreneurs, and the establishment of the Southeast Hamilton EEZ, certainly just another example of that. Mr. Speaker, it must be noted that we have seen some fantastic examples of businesses that have located within the EEZs and are thriving, and some that come off the top are the Handy's Laundromat or the Food Hub in Somerset and now in St. George's, as well as the Security Associates who re-domiciled into Northeast Hamilton. And then we also the Bermuda Diabetes Association and so forth. I think it's critical that we emphasize that property owners have been able to take advantage of these incentives as well. And I think about customs duty deferment, where a lot of property owners within the economic empowerment zones have been able to do some refurbishments and some renovations to their properties and receive customs duty deferment as well. So I'm more emphasizing that it's not just the businesses that take advantage, it's the residents and the property owners that are allowed to take advantage of economic empowerment zones as well. Mr. Speaker, I'll end by saying that I certainly want to thank the Honorable Minister and his team for putting this piece of legislation forward, along with the BEDC team for their continued work that they do and their immeasurable contribution that they make to the EEZs. And certainly we look forward, as the opposition leader said, to not just passing legislation, but one day being able to say that as a result of this legislation, a part of our city is on the regeneration and about to be vibrant again. Thank you.
Thank you, MP Adams. Is there any other member wish to make a contribution? MP Simmons?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and good afternoon.
Good afternoon to you.
Colleagues, good afternoon, Bermuda. I rise in support of the bill, and particularly because of the incredible work that Bermuda Economic Development Corporation has done since 2017. Part of the issue in terms of developing economic empowerment, specifically Black economic empowerment, was to break down the barriers and access to capital. We have often said in Bermuda that it's easier to get a loan, to get a boat or a car than it is to get your business started. The BEDC has created an alternative for that. They've created an alternative to provide logistical support and strategic support to businesses that are starting out. And so when we look at the economic empowerment zones, I think that we have for many years seen it in an incubation stage, where we've been seeing what works, what could grow, what could advantage businesses and the communities. And I think that we, as we push the boundaries further in Southeast Hamilton,
we must also continue to keep looking at how we can drive this further to better empower our people and the businesses in these areas, to drive investment while maintaining and not creating instances of gentrification and things of this nature. And so we support this, and we're glad to support this, but I'm going to take the opportunity because I know in the near future, there will be some expansion of the Western Economic Empowerment Zones. And it would not be good of me not to take this opportunity to persuade the minister, cajole the minister, pray for the minister to extend the boundaries much, much further east in the direction of Georges Bay Road. And I'd like to, because when we look at the businesses, for example, at Somerset Bridge, historic Robinson's Marina, we've got the Bridge Trading Post, we've got the Bermuda Water Sports, we've got the Georges Bay Laundromat coming up there. We've also got White Hill, where we still have a commitment to be able to restore the clubhouse there. And so I think that in light of an area of the Western Zone that is steeped in entrepreneurship, the amount of business owners, the amount of people who have businesses within that area, I think the opportunity to expand these benefits to my constituents and to yours as well, I believe, Mr. Speaker, would be, I think, very appreciated by the Somerset community, the SAMS community, and will be very appreciated by those who really see the work and the support and the resources that Bermuda Economic Development Corporation is providing to so many businesses, small businesses and Black businesses across the island. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, MP Simmons. Does any other member wish to make a contribution? There are none? Minister?
Mr. Speaker, I certainly thank the members of this honorable house for their support. It was one question that was asked from the honorable member Susan Jackson in terms of the synergies, in terms of development plans for a future city. We are in a consultation phase now for the next city plan, and all key and relevant stakeholders are consulted in the development of that plan. But it's two things that we must balance, and one is infrastructure development versus entrepreneurship and small business development. And I think there's two independent tracks that are required for each. But I would like to say that the synergists are there, and the BEDC are heavily involved with what's happening with the city plan. And that was referenced in the paper that I actually presented to the House regarding the study of whether or not we should expand to Southeast Hamilton, key elements of the city plan and how this will support those elements which were in the city plan. So with those comments, Mr. Speaker, I move that the said draft order be approved and that a suitable message be sent to Her Excellency the Governor.
And there are no objections? Granted. The appropriate documentation will be done and the message forwarded to the governor. That, members, brings us to a close of, of the order paper. So, Minister, would you like to do your third reading on your first bill?
Mr. Speaker, I move that Standing Order 21 be suspended to enable me to move the bill entitled the Bermuda Immigration and Protection Prohibition Order Amendment Act 2023 be now read a third time by its title only.
Are there any objections? There are none. Proceed.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the bill be now read a third time by its title only and passed.
The bill has been read by its title only and is now passed. Thank you, Minister. Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that the House be now adjourned until Friday, December 15th.
Yes. Any members wish to speak to that? None? MTPM, as I see you there.
Welcome back, Mr. Speaker.
Let me just adjust the clock for you so that we don't take any of your time from you. You can begin now.
Is your new standing orders 30 minutes?
Actually, it's 15.
Mr. Speaker, how are you? Nice to see you back. The Deputy Speaker I want everybody giving him a round of applause.
Yes.
He did a Herculean job in your absence.
Thank you.
And also his deputy, MP Fogu. Mr. Speaker, are you familiar with the term Stockholm Syndrome?
Yes.
Stockholm syndrome. There was this lady named, I want to say Patty Hearst. She got kidnapped. She was the heiress of a very rich family. And she got kidnapped by some rough guys. Yes, SLE.
Yeah.
And during her time of being incarcerated with them, she came out one day and became a bank robber, just like them. Got caught, went jail, wrote a book, made more money. But the point is, how does someone go from this one state of mind, being kidnapped by people, and then sympathizing with them to the fact that you're going to commit crimes on their behalf? It's called the Stockholm syndrome. Mr. Speaker, earlier this week, I had a conversation, very candid conversation with a colleague. And they were of the opinion that we should be nice to the UK. The UK has done nothing wrong to us. And so on and so forth. So it took me a while to actually absorb that someone of this magnitude would be saying the things that they're saying. So I had to go back and say, okay, well, maybe they have Stockholm syndrome. And I have to, let me break it down, Mr. Speaker. I won't even talk about slavery and colonialism. I'll bring it to contemporary times. Mr. Speaker, under your speakership, if that's the word, in 2018, the United Kingdom Parliament, that's the upper house and the lower house, the common house and the House of Lords, set out to put in an order in council. Order in council means just what it means. We are ordering you to do it. An order in council to the overseas territories that they must, not may, they shall give up the public registers of beneficial ownership. What does that mean to the common layperson? The common layperson may not even know what this means. But what it means for countries such as Bermuda, Cayman Islands, British Virgin Islands, maybe one or two others, it means that this is where persons, our financial services are based off of persons being able to know that their privacy is secure in our country. If I happen to be a billionaire and I have a company registered here, I don't need everybody to know for various reasons. But the UK is saying, no. We want to know everybody who's got money, not necessarily in your country, but have companies registered in your country. Which is sort of ironic because last year when the war in Ukraine broke out, it was revealed slowly but surely that Russian oligarchs were laundering money through a British place called London. Billions of dollars. They were giving money to both sides of the political sides. But that was cool. But you old folks down in the islands, no, you can't have those companies down there. So that was the order in council. Sorry, can't hear you. Would you like to point of order me?
Talk this way.
Okay. So, fast forward to 2019, the Foreign Affairs Committee of the UK House of Commons, which is comprised of persons from all the parties. You have the Labour Party, Tory Party, SNP, the Greens. They put out a report in February of 2019 recommending that any British subject residing in any overseas territory shall have the right to vote in elections in those territories. Furthermore, they shall have the right to run in those elections in those territories. So what does that mean to the common person? It means somebody who is an accountant or they could be a plumber. As long as they're a British citizen living in Bermuda, they could vote in our elections and they could run in our elections. That's what that means. Further to that, they also said that they want to force the overseas territories to accept same-sex marriage. Keyword, force the overseas territories to accept same-sex marriage. Okay. Fast forward to 2023, earlier this year, the person who's the chair of the Committee for Overseas Territories, MP Alicia Kearns, who's a Tory MP, ran on again to reiterate that the UK Parliament should force the overseas territories to accept same-sex marriage. You see, this lady has never been to Bermuda, to my knowledge. She's never been to the other islands, but she wants to use the power of the UK Parliament to force us to accept something that our people don't want. That's colonialism, Mr. Speaker. So fast forward again, Mr. Speaker, to yesterday, December 7th. There was a motion in the House of Commons by Dame Margaret Hodge to reiterate that by the end of 2023, this year, this month, that the UK Parliament forced through order of council the overseas territories to have a public register of beneficial ownership. My point to you, Mr. Speaker, is this. When someone says the UK is our friend, you ask yourself, so if they're our friend, why are they attacking our economic base? Why are they attacking our political democracy? And why are they attempting to force their social norms on us? That can't be a friend. It's another word for it, but it definitely is another word that starts with F, but it ain't friend. Mr. Speaker, yeah, that would be it. Foe, not fogo, but foe. Mr. Speaker, here's the thing. One of our jobs as parliamentarians is to educate the people, not just on the little things that's happening in the potholes, the grass is growing. There's things there's the things that we need to deal with. But it's important for people on both sides of the aisle to tell the truth about what the UK is attempting to do to the overseas territories. Because at the end of the day, it affects us economically, number one. It affects us democratically, number two. And it affects us socially. So I say to my beloved friend, I submit again. Yes, and they also earlier a couple of weeks ago said, hey, tell you what, we want to do your captives too. They want to come after our captives. So we do all this, we go through all these hoops to protect our international business. But our administrative power is looking to how to get it from us. They cannot be classified as a friend. They give us one thing but want to take 10 things. That's not a friend. So here's the thing, Mr. Speaker. We have to be honest with our people, tell them the full truth, not just the parts that works for your political party. Tell them the full truth of what dangers, because no matter who is the government, we are still going to be under the UK government who wants to give us an order in council, which force us to do things that are against our best interests. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, honorable member. Does any other honorable member wish to speak? MP Simmons.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I won't be long. I just wanted to stand and express my sympathies and prayers for a young man. I won't give the family name, a young man who was an 11-year-old boy who was struck across from the Somerset Bridge apartments yesterday. Family is, of course, waiting to see how it plays out for him health-wise and medically. But, beautiful family, beautiful young man, beautiful wife, and beautiful son, and, struck on the street. Now, while the circumstances have not been put out there fully in the public, and I'm not going to give the families names, but I think it's a very strong reminder for all of us in this holiday season to be vigilant on our roads, to express, as the old cliche says, care, caution, and courtesy to each other, because this can have devastating effects on families and lives. And so my family is praying for them, and I encourage the people of Bermuda to also extend their prayers for this young man and his family. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, MP Simmons. Does any other member wish to make a contribution?
Good afternoon, Mr. Speaker.
MP Simmons, MP Lester, have I acknowledged you yet? MP Lester, would you like to make a contribution at this time?
Good afternoon, Mr. Speaker, to the listening audience. I wasn't going to speak, Mr. Speaker, but the member before me, he mentioned something that got me jumping up, and it is said to her that there was an accident with a young man that has been seriously injured. I wanted to send a general word safety message. Right now, the Bermuda Road Safety Council, in partnership with Auto Solutions, are running a campaign, a road safety campaign called Save Lives, Slow Down. Overall, in general, road safety, we have to, especially in this Christmas season leading up to, we want everyone to share this time with their family and friends and loved ones, but we want them to do it safely. If you're going out to any of these social events to consume alcohol, do it responsibly. Plan how you're going to get home if you're planning to consume alcohol. And just remember all the road rules. The speed limit is 35 kilometers. 35 kilometers. As they say, 35 keeps you alive. We want people to be alive, stay alive, and arrive alive. As I said, just a short, brief message. Our tag for this campaign is slow down. Your family is waiting for you. So I want everyone to remember that as on the roads over this holiday period, slow down. Your family will be waiting for you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, MP Lester. No other speakers. We consider the House adjourned for today, and we look forward to returning next week. Members, have yourself a safe and enjoyable weekend with your families. Thank you. And now stand adjourned.